Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Green Party has given extensive consideration to this bill. It is always difficult, we think, to form a single policy on such a wide-ranging omnibus bill, and I acknowledge the work initiated in this respect by the Honourable Rick Barker earlier. But forming a policy is difficult because its key provisions would amend various pieces of legislation, in particular 4 acts. So let me consider each one in turn. First, the bill would amend the District Court Act 1947 to make it easier to recover civil debts by setting up mandatory deductions from wages and benefits. The mandatory fine deductions could disproportionately affect low-income and beneficiary families. If a system were developed to means test convicted defendants, this could be a worthwhile proposal. Secondly, the bill would amend the Land Transport Act 1998 to allow for driver's licences to be suspended for failure to pay traffic fines. Suspending licences for failure to pay driving fines could also be seen as excessively punitive if the incidence of malfeasance rests disproportionately on the poor. But if not, then an argument exists for suspension. These 2 proposed changes raise the whole matter of the degree to which legislation rests on empirical evidence. In the explanatory note to the bill, the government provided no evidence on which income groups are primarily affected by fines. The issue of facts that we have at our command as a country on this kind of issue is quite frankly unsatisfactory. We have, for example, sought to research the question whether fines exacted on convicted defendants in New Zealand fall disproportionately on lower income groups overall. Neither the Parliamentary Library nor the Ministry of Justice were able to ascertain this fundamental fact pertaining to social equity within our judicial system. Reports, we are told, indicate that young people have difficulty in paying their fines, presumably because, in part, of lower income. But this is not based on any rigorous research. Indeed, no research along those lines appears to have been done. Yet, through our collective intuition, we strongly suspect, even if we cannot prove conclusively, that fines are exacted disproportionately on the lower income group. That, of course, correlates with 2 categories: young people and ethnicity. With regard to youth, it is a telling story. As of June 2008, we find that over 500,000 individuals, some 16% of all Kiwis over 15 years of age, owe fines. That is 1 in 6. The amount owing, as has been noted, totals $783 million. About 7% owes 52% of that sum. Half of those are under 30 years of age. Most, we are told, cannot afford to pay those fines, and so those fines remain uncollectible. Some who can afford to pay choose not to do so until resource-intensive enforcement action is undertaken. Some 54% of fines by value are passed to the courts for enforcement action. About 41% by value of those unpaid fines is owed by people under 25. And 60% of that relates to just 2 categories of offences: vehicles that are unlicensed or lacking warrants, and drivers violating their licence permits. The Ministry concludes that with young people, default is partly due to inability to pay, but more fundamentally, a matter of inability to deal with the regulatory system. Let us set aside for the moment the major crimes of violence, drugs and property. Let us simply take traffic offences. They are, after all, the most likely specific crime to result in a fine. Some 55% result in fines. For traffic offences, we are given statistics relating to ethnicity and gender, but not age. What is more, they date back to 1998. Setting aside this shortcoming, we find that fines, as opposed to other penalties, are imposed less frequently on Maori and Pasifika than on Pakeha. With Maori, it is 34%. With Pasifika, it is 49%. With Pakeha, it is 58%. The conclusion is that other sentences, either more severe, such as preventive detention, or less severe, such as community service, are imposed relatively more on Polynesians than on Europeans. So what is to be our conclusion with regard to these two proposed amendments? The Green Party finds that there is an unacceptable shortcoming in the data pertaining to means testing for fines. But we conclude that there is strong indirect evidence that incapacity to pay is correlated with lower income groups, and this affects particularly both the young people and our Polynesian people. Mr. Speaker, the third change introduced by the bill would be to amend the Summary Proceedings Act, and it would do so in three ways. First, it would authorise release of the amount of overdue penalties by the Ministry of Justice to potential creditors, and the release of credit applicant information to the Ministry of Justice to assist with fines enforcement. The release of credit information to and by Ministry of Justice seems to us to be reasonable. Secondly, the Summary Proceedings Act would give courts priority over secured creditors for seized property, where the overdue penalties could have been discovered before finance was advanced. In this respect, giving courts priority over secure creditors, if they knew about overdue fines, makes sense to us. Thirdly, the Summary Proceedings Act would authorise home detention or prison sentences to be substituted for, quote, unaffordable and unenforceable reparation orders, end quote. In this respect, the provisions that would allow prison sentences when people cannot pay reparation orders seems to us draconian and inappropriate, and would place further burden on our stretched prisons. Putting people in jail also increases the likelihood they will commit further crimes. It will add to an already overstretched prison population, and it will add to an already overstretched public purse. The final change introduced by the bill would be to amend the Sentencing Act 2002 and various other acts to improve the operation of reparation and vehicle confiscation as penalty regimes. The Green Party has previously opposed the vehicle confiscation and crush regime as being ineffective and in breach of human rights. It follows that we would oppose these sections of the bill. Mr. Speaker, given the dubious implications of some of these provisions of this omnibus bill, the Green Party will vote against. Thank you.